Hi, this is Jaya. In this video, we shall see the summary of Ruins of a Great House, a poem by Byderek Walcott. The poem begins with the quotes from Sir Thomas Browne describing a setting winter sun. It starts like this: though our longest sun sets at right declinations and makes but winter arches, it cannot be long before we lie down in darkness and have our light in ashes. Brown in Urn Burial. Now, he begins the first stanza by describing a great house which is now in ruins. But actually, he is symbolizing the European Empire by comparing it with this great house. And he says, what is left now is only the stones of the great house. And these stones are just thrown away in the earth, and you can only see lizards coming there to sharpen their claws. He says that even the cherubs which decorated the gate now sing out with their stained mouths, and the wheels of the carriages have gone into the mud which is outside the gate. And there are three crows which settle in the creaking branches of a eucalyptus tree, and the smell of rotting lime is filled in the air. And this actually brings us the memory of the rotting of this old empire. And he ends the stanza with a quotation from Blake, whose words call out goodbye to the green fields and happy groves, which have been replaced by ruin. He says, stones only, the disjecta membra of this great house. So he says only stones are remaining, which are the remains of this great house. We, moth-like girls, are mixed with candle dust, and only the dust of the candle is there, remain to file the lizard's dragonish claws. And these stones are lying down in the ground, and only lizards are using it to polish their claws. The mouths of those gate cherubs shriek with stain. Even the cherubs which were singing on the gates are even now making noise, but their mouth is stained. Axle and coach wheel silted under the muck of cattle droppings. The wheels of the coach are now buried in the ground. Three crows flap for the trees and settle, creaking the eucalyptus boughs. And there is a eucalyptus tree, and in those branches we can find three crows flapping their wings. A smell of dead limes quickens in the nose, the leprosy of empire. Leprosy is the ruin of the body, and he says there is smell of the dead lime which shows the ruins of the empire. Farewell, green fields, farewell, ye happy groves. And in the next stanza, he talks about this great decaying empire which he compares as a great house which is in ruins now. All the marbles of this great house which made up the place, its culture, was lauded in classical Greek and in South America. That is, at one time it was claimed as a very great place by all over the world. Yet this beauty was deciduous. Deciduous describes to the deciduous forest where during fall all the leaves will wither down, referring to the plants that lose their leaves in the fall, and now it is totally gone. What is left is the lawn overgrown with rough forest. Below the dead and fallen leaves, animals and humans have rotted down to bone. These dead creatures were never good, but rather come from evil days, from evil times. Marble like Greece, like Faulkner's South in stone. Deciduous beauty prospered and is gone. But where the lawn breaks in a rash of trees, a spade below dead leaves will ring the bone of some dead animal or human thing, fallen from evil days, from evil times. In the third stanza, he returns to the river on the banks of which the lime trees grew. They were the first crop grown on the manor's grounds. The manor's wealthy, immoral young men and the beautiful young women they pursued are both gone, but the river is still there, flowing. The speaker climbs a wall decorated with wrought iron, made by craftsmen now exiled, trying to protect the great house. They may have successfully protected it from guilt, but not from the worms or the mice which gnawed it into ruin. The speaker hears the wind shaking in the limes and hears it as the death of a great empire. A death brought about through the abuse of ignorant people by violence and Christianity. It seems that the original crops were limes, grown in that silt that clogs the river's skirt. The imperious rakes are gone, the bright girls gone. The river flows, obliterating hurt. I climbed a wall with the grill ironwork of exiled craftsmen protecting that great house. From guilt, perhaps, not from the worm's rent, nor from the padded cavalry of the mouse. And when the wind shook in the limes, I heard what Kipling heard, the death of a great empire, the abuse of ignorance by Bible and by sword. The fourth stanza begins in a green lawn, split up by short walls built out of stone. The dawn dips down to the river, and the speaker paces over it, thinking of the great poets of the English Empire, men who wrote beautifully and murdered on behalf of the empire. Now their memories are muddled because people aren't sure whether to remember them for their writing or their crimes. The glorious green age which Blake called back to, the height of civilization and cultural achievement, was itself rotting because it sank of the violence of empire. Its representatives are long dead, but the rot remains. The other remainder is their words, which rise up out of the ashes of empire and burn the eyes of the speaker. A green lawn, broken by low walls of stone, dipped to the rivulet, and pacing, I thought next of men like Hawkins, Walter Raleigh, Drake, ancestral murderers and poets more perplexed in memory now by every ulcerous crime. The world's green age then was rotting lime, whose stench became the charnel galleon's text. The rot remains with us, the men are gone. But as dead ash is lifted in a wind that fans the blackening ember of the mind, my eyes burnt from the ashen rose of dun. And now, in the final stanza, he begins full of rage, thinking of the people who were enslaved and killed by the empire, whose poetry is so admired, yet against this anger, the compassion within him reminds him that England too was once a colony, seen as a backwater island on the fringes of Europe, torn up by the cold winds, the foaming English Channel between it and France, the fighting of different factions. He ends not in the anger he expected from himself, but rather with this compassion, this sense that the great manor belonged to a friend. Ablaze with rage, I thought. Some slave is rotting in this manorial lake, but still the coal of my compassion fought that Albion too was once a colony like us, part of the continent, piece of the main. Nook shortened, rook overblown, deranged by foaming channels and the vain expense of bitter faction. All in compassion ends. And there he ends his poem. It's a beautiful poem. If you have anything more to add on to what I've said, please write it in the comment box. Like the video, share it with your friends. And if you have not subscribed my channel, please subscribe. Thank you.